I'll be reading from Joshua 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I will give you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea, towards the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give to them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night. You may observe to do according to all that is written in it, for then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor dismay, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
Good morning. We're going to be in Joshua today. So stay open there to Joshua chapter 1. We will be picking out verses from chapter 1 all the way through chapter 6. There are several stories in the Bible that have captured the attentions of the world, but especially us as we are children. If we ever heard these stories as children, like I got the chance to. But as we consider excuse me for a moment, my sermon isn't coming up here. I will continue speaking though. As we think about the stories that we've seen as children, the walls of Jericho are one that we consider to a great degree. Even people who are not believers consider the walls of Jericho in many of their the things that they've put forward with their own poetry, our stories. We love to use this concept of the walls of Jericho and those walls falling. And while I want us to focus on that concept, I love in the New American Standard it uses the wall fell down flat. Some versions say the walls came tumbling down, which is where we have our songs from. That was another thing I thought to ask Charles for songs, but there are so many we could have chosen from. Be strong and courageous. The walls came tumbling down. Dare to stand like Joshua. I figured we'll just let him do whatever he's chosen. But when we consider the lessons that we learn from Jericho, it's easy just to think about Jericho and about the walls falling down and just think about the chapter 6, and we forget that the walls of Jericho are chapter 6. There were 5 previous chapters. And so what do we do with those chapters? And I want us to consider that as we look here this morning. The outline is going to be as follows. We're going to do a little bit of review, some history prior to Joshua. Then we'll talk about cleansing the people, consecrating them, renewing the covenant, preparing them for the conquest into Canaan. That, of course, starts here with Jericho. Then we'll look at the fall of Jericho itself, and then we'll try to make some application for us this morning. As we review, the place that we need to start is go back to Exodus chapter 12, please. Exodus chapter 12. All the way back in Exodus chapter 12, when we start in verse 29, is the moment that the Exodus happens, or at least the plague that leads to the Exodus. It came about at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. Pharaoh arose in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was no home where there was not someone dead. What a sad thing to hear, even considering that this is the enemy of the Israelites. It doesn't matter. It's such a sad moment that it had to come to this. That then Pharaoh says in verse 31, then he called for Moses and Aaron at night and said, rise up, get out from among my people, both you and the sons of Israel, and go worship the Lord as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go bless me also. The Egyptians urged the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we will all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls bound up in the clothes on their shoulders, and they leave. And thus we start marching toward the promised land. But the thing is, we're not getting to the promised land quite so quickly. Before we get to any real problems, there's a couple of issues on the way. But when we come to Exodus chapter 20, we see that the law is given. It's given to Moses while he's up on Mount Sinai. That starts in Exodus chapter 20. And what I didn't put on here is Exodus chapter 32, is where we see the first really big mistake from the Israelites, creating an idol, worshiping it while Moses is on the mountain receiving the law. But the final straw of them going, whether they go to the promised land, comes from Numbers chapter 13. If you turn there with me now, Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, God gives a command to Moses. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send out for yourself men, so they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran at the command of the Lord, all of the men who are the heads of the sons of Israel. And it gives the names of these men. Oftentimes we think of these as young men, but we know that if we do some math throughout Numbers and Deuteronomy, Joshua and Caleb are in their 40s. So I believe 45, at least Caleb is 45, because after 40 years of wandering and they go in to take Hebron, it says there that Caleb is 85. So he should be about 45 here. So we consider these young men, but they are well-seasoned men. And so these men are sent. And in verse 17, Moses tells them what they should be looking for, and how they should be spying out the land. And in verse 21, they go from the wilderness of Zin, which is on the southern edge of Israel, specifically of the tribe of Judah's land, and they go all the way up to Lebo Hamath, which is up in the north. And they mostly stay, though, around Hebron. And it says where the descendants of Anak were. If you're not familiar with who those are giants. And Hebron is well known for a place full of giants. And then they came to the valley of Eshcol, cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two men with some of the pomegranates and figs. That's how wonderful this land appears. But the problem comes in verse 25. When they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Hey, just what God promised, right? God said, you leave Egypt, I'll give you a land flowing with milk and honey. And they saw exactly what God had promised. And if they weren't sure about God's promises before, they should be now, but God has shown them time and time and time again about his promises. I'll promise you that I'll give Abraham an exceedingly strong nation, even though he's dead. He and Sarah are dead in the womb. Well, God gave that promise. Now they've become a nation, even not just a nation, but a nation from under severe punishment and slavery. Then God promised that they could leave Egypt after being there for 450 years, as it says in Exodus. And then after that time has come, to the very day that they entered Egypt, then what we're told is in order to prepare for that, God promised that they would leave Egypt and thus sent plagues to ensure that that would happen. And thus, as we saw, they did leave. But before bringing them to this land of milk and honey, God took them out to the wilderness to show them what his law was and what he expected of them. And so at this point, God, having delivered promises that he had made, some a long time ago, we should have a good idea that now yet another one of God's promises has been fulfilled. But look at verse 28. Nevertheless, such a sad word. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites, and the Amorites are living in the hill country. The Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. So what's interesting here is who at this point in time is the powerhouse of the known world? Well, that would have been Egypt. And God single-handedly defeated the entire army of Egypt, and not just defeated the army in bringing the Red Sea down upon them, but utterly decimated Egypt with these plagues. And the plagues are special in and of themselves. It shows that God has power even over their perceived gods. So God has shown that he's capable of helping them. But all they do is they look at these people, and despite all of the miracles that they've seen, say, but these people are scary. Well, Caleb tries to help, but it doesn't go very well. As he tries to help in verses 30 through 33, he shows a great amount of faith, basically saying exactly what I said. Look at what all God's done for us, and you're going to say that we can't go and take them, which is what I love about Caleb. When it's time to go and settle in the land, where does he choose? Hebron, and drives out the giants and slays them at 85 years old. So I love Caleb. He's a very interesting character. For having so little in the Bible said about him, he's a very interesting character. But if you look at chapter 14, chapter 14 is really what sets us up for where we're starting this morning. If you go down to verse 20, okay, in the first verses of Numbers, the people decide to listen to the 10 spies that had a negative report instead of Caleb and Joshua. And God comes to the people, comes to Moses, and basically says, look at everything I've done, and they're not going to listen to me. Moses intercedes for them. And then in verse 20, the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word. That was what Moses had asked, please forgive them. So he says, I have pardoned them. But indeed, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. Surely all the men who have seen my glory and my signs, which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times and have not listened to my voice. 10 is an interesting number there, if you're paying attention. Shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall take possession of it. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites live in the valleys. Turn tomorrow and set out to the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. And he will also add Joshua there in verse 30 as to who will be saved from this wandering in the wilderness. He asks how long he will bear with them in verse 27. Let's go down to verse 29. This is what's particularly important for where we are now. Your corpses will fall in this wilderness, even all your numbered men, according to your complete number, from 20 years old and upward, who have grumbled against me. He's going to say this a few times. The people that he expected to fall in the wilderness were the men who are of fighting age. That's are the ones who fall. Except for, surely you shall not come into the land which I swore to settle you, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. Your children, however, whom you said would become a prey, I will bring them in, and they will know the land which you have rejected. But as for you, your corpses will fall in this wilderness. Your sons shall be shepherds for 40 years in the wilderness, and they will suffer for your unfaithfulness until your corpses lie in the wilderness. According to the number of days which you spied out the land, 40 days, for every day you shall bear your guilt a year, even 40 years, and you will know my opposition. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely this I will do to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be destroyed, and there they will die. As dark as all of this is here, I don't want verse 31 to escape your notice here. It's a glimmer of hope in the curse that God is bringing here. Your children, however, whom you said would become a prey, I will bring them in. All the children that they said, they're going to decimate us and take our children, and all of this is going to go away. God says, okay, those children who you're worried about, they'll be the ones who take the land. And thus we come to Joshua chapter 1. Here in Joshua chapter 1, now, if you'll turn there with me, we're going to be in Joshua for the remainder of this morning. As God is preparing the people now, we have been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. So as we said, 20 and up are the ones who were going to fall in the wilderness. So the oldest of them, besides Joshua and Caleb, the oldest of the men are 60. And as they're coming in, God knows that he has certain expectations and responsibilities for them, and they have certain needs from him. And so he starts with Joshua, and he starts with talking to him about courage. Nathan read this for us. Nathan, thank you. Let's read it one more time. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and as far as the great sea toward the setting of the sun will be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. 3 times he says that. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And so he knows what they need. They need courage. They've just spent the last 40 years watching those who had been leading them die, especially Moses and Aaron, the two that had been leading them from the very beginning. Moses even more of a leader than Aaron, but they have watched them die. And though Joshua has been Moses' assistant, well, Joshua's not Moses, is he? And so there's concern, perhaps, about who Joshua is. But remember, Joshua and Caleb are the oldest. They're the ones that that the people can lean on the most. And so God gives this message first to Joshua. And then notice Joshua passes that courage on in verses 10 and 11. Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves, for within 3 days you are to cross this Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess it. Now is the time that we are going in and God is with us. The Lord your God is giving you, right? They're going to fight, but the land isn't coming to them by their hand. It's coming by the hand of the Lord. I also want to point out here, God knew his people even when they left Egypt. Back in Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 and 18, it says, now when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near. For God said the people might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Hence, God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and the sons of Israel went up in martial array from the land of Egypt. So God knew from the start, we're going to have to be careful with these people. Well, now God says it's time, but he knows that they need courage. So he starts off with telling them to be courageous. Then in chapter 2, Joshua is going to send in 2 men as spies. That also probably shouldn't escape your notice. I have a feeling I know why Joshua sends 2 instead of perhaps 12. But he sends 2 and says, hey, we're going to go into Jericho, right? It says view the land, but especially Jericho. And so they're going through the city of Jericho, and they come to the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. Don't let harlot escape your notice too quickly either, right? By the time they're coming to the house of a prostitute and needing to stay there, things must have been dire as far as lodging is concerned. But once again, God is with them here because Rahab is going to protect them. And as Rahab protects them, it shows that there is a faith that she has. Let's start reading verse 1 here. Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly from Shittim, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came into the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. It was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. And the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she says, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. It came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan to the fords. And as soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, this is what's important here, verse 9, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also will deal kindly with my father's household, and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother, my brothers and my sisters, with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. And they agree. These 2 men agree to such a promise. But what I love here, I said don't let harlot escape your notice. Things must have been pretty desperate if they're going in to the house of a prostitute. But look at the kind of woman she really is. I think that's what's important for us here. Any Jew reading this in any modern sense, as the book of Joshua is being recorded, would have recoiled at such a term, and that they would deign to stay with such a woman. And then the words that come out of her mouth should also be a surprise. But the sad thing here is that someone even like Rahab is exhibiting faith unlike any that the Israelites had shown before. Remember, going all the way back to those 12 spies, 10 of them said, we can't take this land. What's her response? God is God. There is nothing we are going to be able to do to stop him. She recognizes what should have been written in the very bones of Israel. And yet she's the one who expresses it better than just about anyone else to this point in Israel's history. And so they make this promise with her to save her, and that's exactly what we'll see later. So they make the promise here. They're very specific about how they make this promise. They don't just promise to save her, but they expect certain actions from her, and we'll see later that she goes through with all of that. She holds up her end of the bargain, and thus she will be saved. Now we come to Joshua chapters 3 and 4. We should read through all of chapter 3 and 4, but we don't have time this morning. But please read all the way through this afternoon when you go home. Go ahead and read chapters 3 and 4 for yourself and take it all in. I think you'll find something interesting here. But here we're going to have a second crossing, right? We had our first crossing with the Red Sea. And so now, as God was going to make them cross through the Red Sea and then bring them into the land, now we're doing another crossing, more proverbial of what God did at the Red Sea. It's not exactly the same. They had a wall of water on both sides here. That is not the case, but still very impressive, the miracle that God brings for Israel. But part of this that I wanted to make sure we point out here is that they are supposed to be consecrating themselves. That's over in verse 5 of chapter 3. Joshua said to the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." And so they pick up the ark. They're supposed to leave 2,000 cubits between them and the ark. But the ark makes it to the Jordan. And as they go to step in, then the waters dry up and the priests are able to stand in the middle of the Jordan. It says here in verse 17, We'll go ahead and start up in verse 15. And when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the feet of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks all the days of harvest, the waters which were flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap a great distance away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarathan. And those which were flowing down toward the Sea of Arabah, the Salt Sea, we call it the Dead Sea, were completely cut off, so the people crossed opposite Jericho. And note the call back to the Red Sea. The priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground. Nobody just dammed it up and we're pretending this is a miracle. The riverbed is completely dry. And as they stand on dry ground, all Israel crossed on dry ground until all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan. And the reason I bring up chapter 4 as well is because chapter 4 is going to bring another promise from God, a reminder for the people. And so Joshua asks for 12 men who are leaders of their tribes to go while the ark is still in the middle of the Jordan, and they pick up stones, and they carry those stones all the way to Gilgal, and there they set up a monument for God and what God had done for the people. And then Joshua goes to where the ark is standing and sets up another altar with 12 stones in it for where the ark stood while the people were crossing. It says there it's with them to this day, and there are some archaeologists, particularly Dr. Patton, who believes that we may actually know where this site is, that there is a pile of stones that's still there, and perhaps it is the same stones. For them to be there some 3,400 years later would be pretty impressive, but I'm not gonna question it right now. But they make these monuments to God so that every time they see them, it will be a reminder of what God has done for them, bringing them into the land. But of course, it's not just, we remember that he stopped the Jordan. Remember all the stuff we reviewed before. All of that is written into these monuments. It's not just God stopped up the Jordan. It's God delivered us from Egypt. God protected us while we wandered in the wilderness, and now God is bringing us into the land to give it to us. And it says that while you're sitting in your own lands, there's already the promise that you're going to take the land, and as you're settling it, you'll see this monument. And now we get to chapter 5, because now we need to re-up our covenant with God. What we find out is that while they were wandering in the wilderness, the Israelites who came out of Egypt were circumcised. But those who were born while Israel was wandering in the wilderness, they were not circumcised. It does not tell us why. It does not tell us whether God requested that they not. It doesn't tell us whether they just forgot, they weren't doing it. It doesn't really say. But all we know is they weren't circumcised, and so God says that they are to be circumcised. Verse 7 of chapter 5, their children whom he raised up in their place, Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised because they had not circumcised them along the way. And they remained, verse 6, they remained in their places in the camp until they were healed. So before any fighting takes place, God circumcises them. Now, why is that so important? That goes all the way back to Abraham. This is the part of God's covenant with his special people, the nation that was to come from Abraham. So as they come into the land, we have a fresh covenant being made with the people of Israel. Then if we go down to verse 10, so we went back to Abraham and considered the circumcision and the covenant with Abraham. Now the covenant with their fathers. Verse 10, while the sons of Israel camped at Gilgal, they observed the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month on the desert plains of Jericho. On the day after Passover, on that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. The manna ceased on the day after they had eaten some of the produce of the land, so that the sons of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate some of the yield of the land of Canaan during that year. So now they go through Passover, and it had already been established that there's a Day of Atonement connected with Passover. So my understanding here is that observing the Passover, they're also observing the Day of Atonement. So now they weren't just consecrated in their flesh with the covenant of Abraham. Now they are consecrated in spirit by the Day of Atonement. And so now we have the covenant is being established. And now verses 13 through 15. Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" I love his response. He said, "No." Can you imagine Joshua's head spinning after that? Are you for us or for our enemies? No. What do you mean no? I didn't give you a yes or no question. I gave you a question. Who are you for? And the answer is no, I'm for the Lord. I'm not for you. I'm not against them. I'm for the Lord. And that's going to be important here as we consider what we were just talking about in these first 12 verses of chapter 5. Now, he says he's the captain of the host of the Lord, but I'm going to tell you this is God. This is Jesus, and I'm going to prove it to you here. Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, "What has my Lord to say to his servant?" What does the captain of the Lord's host say? If he was just another angel, he would do what every other angelic appearance is. Please get up and stop worshiping me. I am not the Lord. But that's not what the captain of the Lord's host says. He says, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. When was the last time we heard that phrase? Moses and the burning bush. God was speaking to Moses. And while this may not be as spectacular as a bush that's on fire and not being burned up, this is God visiting the leader of his people and giving him courage. It doesn't tell us what the rest of their conversation was, if they had one. We don't know. Because as soon as we start in chapter 6, we see the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I've given Jericho into your hand." Now, some have said this is the same moment here. I don't know about that. It doesn't say. It just says, "So Joshua called, the son of Nun, called the priests and said to them." So it seems like we're in the next day, but maybe this is the conversation that the Lord is having with him. But it doesn't tell us. But notice that as he bows, right? The New American Standard just says, Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down. I believe the King James, the New King James, and the English Standard all say he bowed down and worshiped. But either way, this is God coming to him to give him courage. And so God promises and tells him the plan. This is what the plan is going to be. So now we're here in Joshua chapter 6 for the rest of the morning here. The first 5 verses. Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went in and no one came. No one went out and no one came in. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and the valiant warriors. You shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city once. You shall do so for 6 days." I'm sure hearing that, Joshua said, "Excuse me, we're just going to walk?" Okay, going to walk for 6 days. Also, 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up, every man straight ahead. Interesting here, the way that God lays out this plan. And while it doesn't really tell us how the Jerichites are responding here, I don't think it's a far stretch to imagine that the Jerichites are thinking that Israel has gone a little loopy, being out in the wilderness for the last 40 years. Being out in the sun that long can do that to you. But the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. So Joshua tells the people the plan, and they decide that they're going to obey. If there was anything that Israel learned, if only for a brief moment, coming out of the wandering in the wilderness, it was obey the Lord. And so that's exactly what they do. The Ark of the Covenant followed them, verse 9. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. The rear guard came after the ark while they continued to blow the trumpets. But Joshua commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I tell you, shout, then you shall shout." And so verse 12 and through 14, they do this for 6 days. Verse 15. Then on the 7th day, they arose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. At the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban. It and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them, and take some of the things under the ban, and make the camp of Israel accursed, and bring trouble on it. But the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord, and they shall go into the treasury of the Lord." So the people shouted, and priests blew trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. They utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. I love the image here that God presents. I don't know if this is what God was particularly intending, but what I like to see about this is that there is a trumpet, which was only ever used to do 2 things: to bring people to war and to bring people to the tabernacle to worship. And upon the blowing of these trumpets, then the people shout, and it just reminds me of how God himself operates. He just speaks and things happen. And for a brief moment, he gives the people a taste of what that looks like. And they shout, and the wall falls. And it's the entire wall. I didn't want to take all the time in the world to describe the wall, but the wall is so large they would have chariot races on it. And that wall falls down so completely, the entire wall, that every person surrounding Jericho can just walk up into the city. The only place is Rahab's house. There were houses built into the walls. And the place that we know is the site of Jericho actually shows that when you excavate down far enough. The entire wall has been destroyed and burned, and there is one section where there is room enough for a house that remains standing. And so we see verse 22 through 25. Joshua sent the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the harlot's house and bring the woman and all she has out of there, as you have sworn to her." So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and all she had. They also brought out all her relatives and placed them outside the camp of Israel. That's important. They burned the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron they put in the treasury of the house of the Lord. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared. And she, I don't know if that's important, that she and not her household, but she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. And for even more context of her, go to Matthew chapter 1, verse 5, where it says Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. And so it seems that that is the same Rahab that we see here. And so she is given the honor of being in the lineage of Christ, a Canaanite and a prostitute. Now, I think the assumption here is that she's no longer a prostitute, but I think that should go without saying. And so the promise made to Rahab is kept. And then verses 26 and 27, we see victory. Joshua made them take an oath at that time, saying, "Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and builds this city, Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. And I believe that comes from either Ezra or Nehemiah, that we actually see that curse come to fruition. So it takes many centuries for that to come. But they go up and they have victory in their first moment of conquest in Canaan. So let's consider what we should take with us here this morning. First, a reminder that God knew his people and what they needed in preparation for this conquest. Notice that he doesn't just say, "Okay, go in." He says, "Okay, let's start with courage. Next, let's consecrate the people. Let me show them that I mean business. Let me show them miracles to remind them that I am with them and that I am with Joshua like I was with Moses." And so God doesn't just blaze on. He follows the needs of his people and gives them what they need before expecting them to do any more. And so it shows his great patience and care for his people. Rahab proved the faith that God wanted from his own people. That again, even for a short time, he had. We're going to have some difficulty here right at the beginning, even right after this conquest of Jericho. But a Gentile, a Canaanite, is proving the faith that God wanted from his own people. And she just shows that anyone, man or woman, Jew or Gentile, even whatever occupation, is capable of responding to the call of God. If she is capable of responding, so are you. Third, God's plan may not make sense, but the one thing I can guarantee is it's better than anything you've cooked up. And when you consider his plan, you need to trust him and know that he knows what he's doing. And lastly, if you will trust him, God will bring down the walls that are in your life, especially the walls that are separating you from him. Those walls are exceedingly great, and they are quite insurmountable for our own selves. They were really built by the devil, and he did a great job of building those walls. But thankfully, Jesus came. And while he was on the cross, he gave us the ability to bring down these walls and to show us that we can conquer that which is inside us. Not because we're so great, but because God is good. Because he has done everything that needed to be done to show us how we can be saved. And that's what he's calling you this morning. He's calling you to respond like Rahab. That somebody who, if you're not a Christian, you're outside the faith. You're outside the people of God. But if she can answer that call, so can you, by believing, by repenting, by confessing, by being baptized, by persevering through it all until the end. That's what God expects. And He will help us every step of the way, just as He helps Israel conquer Canaan. Just like He had promised all the way back with Abraham, this land that you are sojourning in, I will give to your people. And that's exactly what He did. And if He can do that for Abraham over centuries of waiting, then He can do that for you now. He is waiting. We're going to sing, I will call upon the Lord. God has called you. Are you going to call upon the Lord this morning? Please do so while we stand and while we sing.